You will help me in welcoming Senate President Peter Courtney and come on over here, and Senator Richard Devlin from Tualatin. How you doing, sir?
Hello, Your Honor. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Where am I sitting?
You're sitting right here, and where you can cause as much trouble as you want. Senator, last week the governor's budget came out. Are you okay?
I want to be a little bit further away from you.
You want to get a little further?
I don't take it wrong. I just...
Anything else?
I'm fine.
Last week the governor shared her budget with the state. I'd be curious about your response to what you saw there and your advice to us and to her.
I think that question was supposed to go to Richard first.
No, it's actually to you.
First of all, I like you because your last name is my middle name.
Is it really?
My mother's maiden name, and she gave it to me of her three sons.
So is it a family name?
That's what I just said. It's my mother's maiden name. Do you know what a maiden name is?
So it came back.
Her name was Constance Coleman.
Do you know?
She married William Vincent Courtney. So, but of her three sons, she gave me her name, Coleman. I love the name Coleman. I just try to be, listen, I'm trying
to pay me a compliment?
No.
And I've already pissed you off?
Look, I like your name.
Thank you.
That's what I wanted to say.
I like my name too. Thank you,
Okay.
Peter.
What was the
question was, the governor issued her budget last week. Do you have any thoughts on what you see?
Well, I have two thoughts. If the governor's not here, it's not really a budget. Because in Oregon, if you are in the state legislature, the state government, or the small government, it's not small, local governments, a budget is a budget that's balanced. The budget is not balanced. It's a list of priorities, wonderful priorities, well done. She is the leader of the state, but it's not a budget. So that's the first thing I have to tell you. So
okay.
I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. To me, when you mention a budget, to me, it means it's got to be balanced, so it's not balanced. So it's not balanced.
All right, so it's the first foray. But the impulses in the budget, the ideas, the priorities set forth feel like, yes, this is the best way to kind of attack the huge deficit that we've got to deal with?
Well, now you're talking about a whole different word. You're talking about revenue now. If you subtly try to move into revenue here, or what? The priorities the governor has for Oregon are very good priorities.
Okay.
Extraordinary, well done, heartfelt, very well done. How we're going to pay for them, that is the 10,000-pound chicken in the middle of the room. And I'd say gorilla, but elephant, but I'm tired of those phrases. I like 10,000 pounds.
I like chicken too.
That's a big chicken.
It's a big chicken. So Senator Devlin.
It could be, just think about it. A 10,000-pound chicken, that is not a small chicken.
Do you know how far back your mom's name goes? Do you know?
Do you really want to know?
Yeah.
Do you really know?
Yeah, absolutely.
There was an individual on the Mayflower that's a direct relative of mine. You asked it.
Do you know where they landed?
They landed in Plymouth.
1634.
1634
is mine.
I'm not trying to bond with you, my friend, at all. There's nothing here.
Well, I don't think there's much hope in that. No.
I like the way you dress too. Look at this tie.
You.
I got the tie.
It's awesome. So Senator Devlin saved me over here. So our economy is growing, state revenues are up. How do we have a deficit?
Well, I think we're facing a challenge different from anything that we've actually faced before. And everything is actually coming to bear that we've known about for quite a long time. One of the things is as we've come out of the last recession, our revenue growth in this coming biennium has fallen to levels that we did not have since 2011. Most people have not said that here today.
No.
That we only have a net revenue growth, and you'll hear different numbers, but when I talk about net, I'm talking about what we actually have to be able to cover the expenses that we have of only about 6%. And we're facing a significant challenge because the way our deficit is now before us, it creates some real problems in the sense that we can't balance the budget the way we normally might balance it in difficult times. Normally, and maybe not the best of worlds that we would do this, if we had expenses in education and public safety that were slightly above where our growth in revenue was, and we had even slightly increased expenditures above that in human services, we'd probably cut back a little bit of everywhere, and then we would actually try to fund what we could, and we'd try to get by till the next biennium. The problem is our increases in human services are so unprecedented and so large, and I'll explain those a little bit later, that it would be impossible to do that at this level.
All right, so go ahead and go into that. So what are the major cost drivers that you see that are making it impossible for us to solve in the way that we traditionally would?
Well, there are really three cost drivers in this budget, but there are some longer-term issues also. Let me cover the three in this budget. The three in this budget are, first, the increases in human services. Let me give you an idea. We have about a 6% net revenue growth for revenue. Public safety and education could both survive. Their current service level is about 8%. You could theoretically cut them back down to 6%. It would be very unpleasant. You would be losing teachers, you would be losing school days, but you would be able to survive. And in public safety, it's going to be very hard to cut significantly because there are very few areas in public safety that you can cut significantly other than OYA or state police or to some extent the judicial branch. And you really can't cut those very far. But the growth in human services is about 18% in DHS, that's Department of Human Services. That's the largest area there is in what we call the APD, Adult and People with Disabilities, and IDD, Individual with Developmental Disabilities. It's both an increase in caseload and it's an increase in cost per case, very significant. 18% is well beyond our ability to pay, given what our resources are. But then when I switch to OAHA, it's a whole different magnitude. The increase there is about 47% currently, and we believe it will grow to about 50%. It's well over $1 billion. That's over $1 billion on a base that's only about $2.1 billion in terms of current general fund. It's important, though, to understand that that increase is not actually an increase in costs as much as it is an increase in who pays. We have a large amount of one-time money that we've been able to utilize to get into the Affordable Care Act to cover the costs. As you may remember, former Governor Kitzhaber negotiated a $1.9 billion agreement in this current waiver period. We have the last payment from that in this biennium, about $134 million. We also generated more in our hospital self-assessment than we anticipated by about $170 million. Those are not new costs. We just don't have that money to pay for those costs. Then in addition to that, the federal government has reduced our general Medicaid rate, about $58 million. And then under the ACA, it's already been described to you, in the coming biennium, we will have to recover 5% for the first 6 months, 6% for the next 12 months, 7% for that, and that's another $275 million. Then there are a few miscellaneous things that are actually just simply loss or reductions in revenue. Tobacco taxes don't grow at the same rate of the services that they're providing, other things. About $700 million of that is not really growth in costs. It's a change in who pays or how we pay for it. You can't really cover that level of increase by going to the other budgets. If you did, you'd have to, one, it's very difficult to cut very deeply into the public safety. It's not as if public safety is inadequately funded, but it's very tightly funded. So the vast majority of those cuts would have to come from education. We've just gone through a period in this recession where we've had massive cuts in public education, where we went 2 bienniums at about $5.7 billion for both bienniums, lost about 7,000 school personnel in that period, and nobody wants to repeat that.
So this is the guy you go to when you're down and you need to get cheered up?
I haven't said the bad part yet.
You haven't? What's the bad part?
Well, the bad part is if I had no revenue, and I can't count on having revenue, nobody can count on having revenue, and I don't know if anything's changed this morning, perhaps Senator Wyden can tell us, but The federal continuing resolutions run out this Friday, so the federal government is basically closing down this coming Friday. I believe they will pass the resolution. But so much of what we do is dependent upon the federal government, what requirements they place on us, and what funding they provide for those requirements. But the reality is, if I have no revenue, this is not the recommendation I would make, in a sense, because I believe there's a different path. But if I had no revenue, one of the ways to balance the budget would be, the first thing that you would do is you'd have to cut K through 12 from the current service level by probably about 2%, roughly about $168 million. Then you'd have to suspend both education-related initiatives that just passed overwhelmingly by the voters. Then you would have to kick off 355,000 people off the Oregon Health Plan. You would basically take off the expanded population. Oddly enough, that would only save you about $400 million, because much of the growth has actually been growth in the population that we would always have to cover and the cost there. Then you would probably be forced to deplete our rainy day fund completely, which would only leave us the Education Stability Fund, which would actually only leave us about under $400 million in reserves left for a coming biennium. Then you would still have to find another $300 to $400 million from other areas in the budget. Like I said, public safety, other education like universities. That's 7% of the budget that isn't actually education, public safety, or human services. And all of this is what you would have to do to survive this coming biennium. The next biennium would get worse, because one, you would have not made long-term decisions, and the long-term decisions you really need to make, you need to figure out a way to bring the cost curve down on your expenditure level, and you need to figure out a way to bring your revenue up, and somewhere in between they meet. If you don't do that, you are going to end up in much more difficult times than we are now. One of our problems right now, and I'll close on this, and then I did a presentation before the caucus, and I told them one of the biggest problems is nothing looks like we're in trouble. When we were going into 11-13, when I took over as co-chair, everybody knew we were in trouble. All of our reserves were gone. The extra money from the federal government was gone. They expected us to make huge cuts in programs. Nobody expects that right now. Our budget is relatively stable till June 30th, and then it's in real trouble.
Wow. I think I'd like to talk to Senator Courtney again.
He's more fun than I am.
Let's go back to the Mayflower. So is there a pathway forward? Is there a way from your seat? Is there a recommendation that you would advise this group to try to help move forward?
You really want me to say what I'm thinking?
I do.
Because last year I gave a speech in Antietam.
You did.
It failed. And I'm reminded of that just moments ago. Someone said to me, "Are you going to go to Antietam again?" I said, "I wish I'd never had." So you really want me to answer the question?
I do.
You know, the nuns used to teach me that you can tell more about a man or a woman, an athletic team, a coach, by the way they handle victory as opposed to how they handle loss. You've won. Smashing, crushing, defeat, you've handed the other side. Something happened to me 36 hours ago, and it wasn't a victory or loss. I was sitting in a little delicatessen in Kihei, Maui, waiting for a certain person to come see me. I had not spoken to him in years. The last time I did, he lit into me and said, because I'd called him, I sensed something was wrong. This was one of my brothers. And he said to me, I'm not going to talk to you ever again unless it's in person. Now, this affected my family and my sons and everyone because they all knew this thing was out there. But I had thought maybe he had arrived, and he had his wife at the same time, and I was shaking, and I called him up. I left him a message. He was a quarter of a mile away from me. I never thought he'd call me. And he did. And he said he would meet me on his terms at a certain place. Am I taking too long?
No, not at all.
At a certain place, at a certain time, Saturday afternoon, 4:30, a little deli there. So I'm there shaking, and I see him come in. This is the oldest of 3 boys, extraordinarily successful businessman at the international level. And he walks in, and here is the middle brother waiting for him. And we start. And he proceeds in 1 hour to take me apart. As we got to the end of our conversation, I said, I got to know something. Would you have ever called me? And he said, you know, Peter, he's then starting to shake. He said, I was so worried something would happen to one of us before we ever spoke. But I could never have called you, Peter. I could never have called you. Now, it is my nature to be accommodating, I'm told, believe it or not. And this is not about Peter. Forget Peter. Forget this example. But the only thing I'm going to say here is, it's not the legislature. It's not the governor. No, it's you. You know, a state whose major political and economic forces are at each other can never be all that it can be. Whether it's their infrastructure, their education, their natural resources, it can never be. But a state whose economic forces and political forces are together can do anything. You're the ones. It'll be you. You don't have to do anything. The other side is wounded, angry, bitter, and mad. But the thing about Antietam is it was a single battle, and we never learned any lessons. We never learned the lessons. I wasn't going to come here today because it just didn't work right. But I will tell you, the path that has been talked about and you'll talk about, Richard Devlin and Peter Courtney will kill themselves to find a path, as will Tina Kotek, who follows me. But I believe in my heart of hearts that you, and I beg you to make that call. I beg you. You don't have to. You don't need to. You're extraordinarily successful in your individual lives and every part of your life. And even this program. Kudos to Duncan and Jeremy, to the organizations. But it's my opinion, the old age, old geezer I am, that someone's got to make that call. They got to make that call. I'm just hoping and praying it'll be you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You did a good job, buddy. I like you.
Thank you, Senator. I like you too. Fantastic.
Man, thank you guys.